It was supposed to be a glamorous night. The red carpet stretched like a ribbon of gold, flashing lights from cameras piercing the darkness, each one capturing celebrities in their finest attire. The Santa Barbara International Film Festival had long been a stage for Hollywood's elite to shine, a place where stars walked among each other with effortless grace, where every smile, every wave, and every outfit was meticulously photographed and analyzed. But this year, the festival would deliver something far more riveting than glitzy gowns or applause. It would deliver a confrontation that no one saw coming. A moment that would ripple across social media, Hollywood gossip columns, and the royal tabloids alike. The night would belong to Cynthia Erivo and Meghan Markle, though not in the way anyone anticipated. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine standing in a room filled with some of the world's most acclaimed actors, filmmakers, and producers. The air hums with the low murmur of anticipation. You've walked the red carpet, smiled for the cameras, waved at fans, and posed with a perfectly choreographed grace that hides the storm brewing inside. Every step is watched, every expression dissected, every move scrutinized by journalists ready to catch the smallest slip. Now, imagine that you are Meghan Markle, walking into this electric room where your past, your public persona, and your royal ties collide with Hollywood's unrelenting gaze. You are a star, yes, but you are also a figure of fascination, critique, and sometimes silent ridicule. And on this night, someone would choose to speak up in a way no one expected. Cynthia Erivo, already a powerhouse in Hollywood with a reputation for unflinching honesty, took the stage. She had come to celebrate talent, to honor the artistry of her peers. But there was something different in the air tonight. A subtle tension, a charged energy that hinted at more than just speeches and awards. For anyone paying close attention, it was impossible not to notice. The way her eyes scanned the room, lingering just slightly longer on certain faces. The way she held the microphone, not with the delicate politeness often expected in such settings, but with a commanding presence that suggested she had something on her mind. And for Meghan, sitting among the audience, there was a flicker of unease, though she might have tried to mask it with her trademark composed smile. By now, many of you may be wondering, what could have possibly led to this explosive moment? Why would a celebrated actress and singer, someone known for her professionalism and poise, choose this particular evening to confront Meghan, of all people? To answer that, we need to step back and consider the unique pressures Meghan has faced as a public figure straddling two worlds: the royal family, where every action is laden with centuries of protocol, and Hollywood, where every move is dissected for relevance, authenticity, and influence. It is a tightrope few have walked successfully. And in that tension, scrutiny is inevitable. But Cynthia's choice of words, delivered in that moment, did more than just acknowledge Meghan's presence. It struck at the heart of a debate that has followed Meghan throughout her public life. The tension between perceived authenticity and curated image, between public persona and private reality. She called Meghan a wannabe. Just two words, but the weight of them, amplified by the room full of industry peers, photographers, and journalists, reverberated instantly. It was not merely an insult. It was a declaration, a bold statement that questioned Meghan's place in Hollywood, her intentions, and her legitimacy as a figure who bridges two worlds that rarely meet. Now, let's pause for a moment. How do you even respond when you are put on the spot in front of hundreds of people, every camera capturing your every reaction? How do you maintain composure when someone challenges your identity, your choices, your credibility in a room where appearances are everything? Meghan's reaction was subtle, nuanced, and layered. A twitch of the lips, a pause, a shift in posture, small gestures that spoke volumes. And yet, for the casual observer watching online or scrolling through social media, these gestures might have seemed minor, almost imperceptible. But for those who understand the stakes, they were monumental. This was the kind of moment that would be dissected endlessly. Clips from the speech began circulating almost immediately. On Twitter, reactions ranged from shocked disbelief to gleeful amusement, with hashtags trending in a matter of minutes. Instagram exploded with reaction videos, some empathetic to Meghan, others lauding Cynthia's audacity. Even news outlets jumped on the story, framing it in ways that would ignite further conversation. Was this a justified call-out, or an unnecessary public humiliation? And in Hollywood, where whispers often carry more weight than public statements, insiders were already debating what this meant for future collaborations, appearances, and social standing. Yet, the drama did not stop at the words themselves. The tension had been building long before Cynthia ever stepped onto the stage. Hollywood is a place where reputation is currency, where relationships are both fragile and fiercely competitive. Every award ceremony, film premiere, or festival appearance carries the potential for alliances to shift and for rivalries to surface. And in this particular case, the collision of two worlds, royalty and Hollywood, added layers of complexity that no one could have anticipated. The question that lingered over the room like an electric charge was simple. What does it take to truly belong in Hollywood? And who gets to decide who belongs? Let's take a closer look at Cynthia herself. Known for her vocal advocacy, sharp intellect, and fearless honesty, she has never been one to shy away from difficult conversations. Her career, though relatively short in comparison to some Hollywood veterans, has been marked by a string of defining performances, each accompanied by a clear statement of self-assurance and individuality. She commands attention not only with her talent, but with her presence, her choices, and her refusal to conform to expectations that feel limiting or unfair. And in this moment, standing on the stage at Santa Barbara, she became more than just an actress. She became the voice of scrutiny, a mirror held up to a figure who has long been under public watch. Meanwhile, Meghan's story is one that has captivated millions. From her early acting days in Hollywood to her marriage into the royal family, her life has been a continuous interplay of admiration, criticism, and relentless media attention. Every move, every word, every social media post has been interpreted, reinterpreted, and often criticized. And though she has shown resilience, charisma, and intelligence, moments like this expose the fault lines of public perception. How quickly respect can shift to doubt, how admiration can turn into scrutiny. Now, here's the tension that makes this story irresistible. The room was silent, yet buzzing. Cameras clicked, people whispered, and the very air seemed to vibrate with anticipation. Cynthia had spoken her words. Meghan had received them. The audience had reacted, but the true impact, the emotional fallout, the backstage whispers, the digital explosion, was yet to fully unfold. And that is where the story truly begins. Not with the words themselves, but with the ripple effect they set into motion. So, what happened immediately after the speech? How did Meghan handle the scrutiny in the moments that followed? How did her team react? And what strategies were deployed to control or redirect the narrative? And perhaps most importantly, what does this reveal about Hollywood's complex relationship with authenticity, ambition, and image? These are questions that cannot be answered lightly, and the answers are far more intricate and compelling than a simple clip or headline might suggest. By the end of this expose, you will see not only the moment of confrontation, but the layers of tension, ambition, and human emotion that surround it. You will witness the clash of worlds, the personal stakes, and the very human reactions behind the public personas. And you will understand why this event was not just another celebrity spat. It was a defining moment, one that exposed the fragile balance between public image and private identity, between admiration and judgment, and between ambition and authenticity. The night air was cool, carrying a whisper of the ocean from the nearby coast, mingling with the scent of designer perfumes, polished leather, and freshly pressed tuxedos. It was the kind of night where Hollywood legends walked the streets in sparkling gowns and tailored suits, where photographers' flashes punctuated every step with bursts of light, and the hum of excitement was almost tangible. The Santa Barbara International Film Festival had always been a jewel in California's entertainment calendar, a place where movies met stars, and stars met each other under the gaze of the public and the press. But this year, it wasn't just the films or the awards that promised to dominate the headlines. There was a tension simmering beneath the glamour, one that would ignite a firestorm no one anticipated. Imagine walking down that red carpet. Each step feels measured, precise. The cameras click incessantly, capturing smiles that are practiced yet flawless, eyes that glimmer with the faintest hint of nerves. Celebrities pause, pose, turn, and repeat the motions endlessly, aware that even the slightest misstep could become a viral moment. And in this sea of stars, one figure stands out, not for her attire, not for the cameras, not even for the applause, but for the history, the curiosity, and the scrutiny that precede her wherever she goes. Meghan Markle. Meghan's entrance was carefully choreographed. Her dress shimmered under the lights, a combination of elegance and understated confidence. Every detail, from her jewelry to her hairstyle, spoke of someone conscious of her image, someone aware of the eyes watching her. She smiled, waved, and maintained a poised grace that masked the storm within. Behind that composed exterior, however, she knew this night was more than a festival. It was a test, a stage where reputations were weighed, alliances observed, and rivalries whispered. The festival itself was a symphony of elegance and excitement. Guests mingled along the red carpet, exchanging polite nods and brief smiles. Journalists huddled in small clusters, their notepads and cameras ready to capture the perfect quote, the perfect shot. The event was a delicate dance of appearances, each person balancing charm, charisma, and just enough mystique to remain memorable. Yet even as the crowd engaged in their polite social rituals, there was an undercurrent of something unsaid, a tension that threaded through the room like an invisible current. This tension was not arbitrary. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to the casual observer, but palpable to anyone paying attention. Eyes flickered with recognition. Conversations paused as certain names were mentioned, and those familiar with the social hierarchies of Hollywood could feel the invisible lines being drawn. The arrival of Cynthia Erivo was one of those moments. She did not glide down the carpet like some of the others. She walked with purpose, her gaze steady, her confidence undeniable. To anyone observing closely, it was clear she was not here to blend in. She was here to be seen, to be heard, and perhaps to say something that would not be easily forgotten. As the cameras followed her, capturing every step, the audience felt the first hints of anticipation. There was an almost cinematic quality to the moment. The interplay of light and shadow, the flashes illuminating faces, the subtle tension that suggested this night would be more than a celebration. And Meghan, aware of the weight of her own presence, scanned the room, taking in the familiar faces and the unfamiliar ones. There were nods of recognition, polite greetings, and yet a careful distance maintained, as if everyone knew the delicate balance of the night could be disrupted by the smallest misstep. In the moments before the speeches began, the room seemed to hold its breath. Conversations slowed, laughter softened, and even the photographers hesitated, sensing that the true drama of the night had yet to reveal itself. Meghan took her seat in the front row, a position that signaled both respect and visibility. She was here to be part of the celebration, yet she could not escape the weight of her dual identity, Hollywood star and former royal, a combination that made every glance, every whisper, every movement an object of scrutiny. Meanwhile, backstage, the energy was equally charged. Assistants hurried through last-minute preparations, adjusting microphones, checking lighting, and ensuring that the stage was flawless. The speakers, including Cynthia Erivo, went over their notes one last time, though it was clear that some messages were less scripted than others. Among the crew, there was an unspoken acknowledgement. This was not just another festival speech. Something was brewing, a storm hidden beneath the elegance and glitz. As the first notes of the opening music played and the spotlight began to sweep across the audience, the tension became almost electric. Each celebrity seated in the room seemed acutely aware of the eyes upon them. Every gesture, every expression would be noted, dissected, and interpreted. And then, in the midst of this orchestrated perfection, Cynthia took the stage. The applause was polite, appreciative, yet her presence alone seemed to carry a weight beyond the norm. She held the microphone not like a prop, but like a weapon, and the room's focus shifted entirely to her. Cynthia began her speech with the elegance expected of someone of her stature, acknowledging colleagues, the festival organizers, and the craft of filmmaking. But then, in a subtle yet undeniable pivot, she addressed a particular presence in the audience. The room's attention sharpened, the cameras adjusted, and suddenly, What had been a standard festival speech transformed into something else entirely. A statement, a challenge, and a moment of unfiltered honesty. For Meghan, the words hit with a weight she may not have expected. The audience around her reacted with a mixture of surprise, curiosity, and quiet shock. There was no immediate laughter, no applause. Only the realization that the script had changed, that the carefully constructed flow of the evening had been disrupted. Cynthia's voice carried across the room with clarity and purpose, and even in the subtlety of her delivery, the implication was unmistakable. It is moments like these that define not only an evening, but a career. Hollywood is filled with applause and admiration, but it is also a landscape where reputations are fragile, where a single word, delivered at precisely the right or wrong moment, can alter public perception forever. And in this case, the tension was compounded by the dual identities in play. Meghan was not simply an actress or a celebrity. She was a figure whose every move had been scrutinized for years, whose choices were endlessly analyzed, and whose presence in Hollywood had always been both celebrated and questioned. As the speech continued, the undercurrent of drama grew more pronounced. Cynthia's eyes scanned the room with deliberate precision, making brief, yet meaningful contact with Meghan. The audience could sense the subtle tension, the almost imperceptible shift in dynamics that indicated this was more than a speech. It was a moment of reckoning. And in those few minutes, the air in the room seemed to thicken, charged with anticipation and curiosity. Every attendee, from the seated stars to the photographers capturing each frame, knew they were witnessing something extraordinary. But even as the speech reached its crescendo, the full impact of what was happening was yet to be understood. The words themselves were powerful, yes, but it was the context, the delivery, and the unspoken implications that would ripple through Hollywood, social media, and the global public. Every camera flash, every whispered reaction, every subtle gesture added to the layers of meaning. And for Meghan, it was a moment that demanded composure, strategic awareness, and emotional resilience. A trifecta few could navigate successfully in real time. In those moments, as the applause faded and the microphones were lowered, the room seemed to exhale collectively. The festival continued, the scheduled awards and speeches proceeded, yet the atmosphere had irrevocably shifted. Whispers circulated among attendees, journalists exchanged glances, and social media had already begun to hum with speculation. Everyone sensed that what they had witnessed was not merely an isolated incident, but the beginning of a story that would unfold in ways few could predict. And then, just as the audience began to settle back into their seats, the whispers became louder. Backstage conversations hinted at reactions that were unseen by the cameras. The team behind the festival organizers exchanged brief, tense words, understanding that they were now managing not only an event but a viral moment in real time. The energy of anticipation had not dissipated. It had transformed into a quiet, simmering tension that promised more revelations to come. Cynthia Erivo was not someone who blended into the background. Even before the Santa Barbara International Film Festival, her presence in Hollywood was impossible to ignore. With a voice that could command a theater and a charisma that drew people in effortlessly, Cynthia had earned her place among the industry's most respected performers. But it was not only her talent that set her apart. It was her fearlessness, her refusal to conform, and her insistence on speaking truth when others hesitated. Consider her trajectory. From her breakout role in The Color Purple, which earned her a Tony Award, to her Academy Award-nominated performance in Harriet, Cynthia had continually demonstrated a combination of discipline, intelligence, and audacity. She was a performer who understood the power of words, of presence, and of timing. Every role she took on, every speech she delivered, carried with it a subtle authority, a statement that she would not be overlooked or underestimated. And that authority was what made her words at the festival so significant. Imagine being in the audience as she stepped onto the stage. It was not merely a matter of physical presence. It was the energy she carried, the quiet but unmistakable weight of someone who knew exactly who she was and what she represented. She commanded attention without demanding it. She drew eyes with a combination of elegance and confidence, but more importantly, with the knowledge that when she spoke, people would listen. And that is precisely what made the moment with Meghan Markle so charged. Cynthia's history in Hollywood offers context for why she might have chosen this particular night to make her statement. She had always been outspoken, especially when it came to authenticity, ambition, and the responsibilities of those in the public eye. Whether addressing social justice, the pressures of the entertainment industry, or the politics of recognition, Cynthia spoke from a place of conviction. She did not mince words, and she did not shy away from controversy when she felt it necessary. To many, she represented integrity and courage, a voice that demanded accountability in a world where appearances often trumped substance. It is crucial to understand this because the words she directed toward Meghan were not random or impulsive. They were deliberate, calculated, and informed by a deep understanding of Hollywood's social dynamics. To call someone a wannabe on such a public stage was to challenge their credibility, question their authenticity, and disrupt the carefully curated narrative they had built around themselves. And in Meghan's case, the stakes were even higher. Meghan was not only a celebrity. She was a former royal, a figure whose every action had been scrutinized under the harshest lenses imaginable. Cynthia's choice to address her in this way was a masterclass in timing and dramatic tension. She did not launch into a tirade. She did not aim to humiliate in a conventional sense. Instead, she used subtlety, wit, and precision, weaving her critique into a speech that was ostensibly about honoring talent and celebrating artistic achievement. And yet, beneath the surface, her message landed with the force of a thunderclap, shocking those who understood the nuance and resonance of her words. But what motivated Cynthia to take this approach? To answer that, one must consider both her personal philosophy and her understanding of Hollywood. Cynthia had always valued authenticity above all else. In an industry built on illusion, she made it her mission to recognize those who were genuine and call out those whose ambitions might be performative rather than sincere. In her eyes, public figures bore a responsibility not only to their craft, but to their audiences. Words, actions, and intentions were inseparable. And when someone appeared to navigate the spotlight with an image carefully constructed for attention rather than substance, she did not hesitate to point it out. This is where Meghan Markle's public persona intersects with Cynthia's critique. Meghan had been navigating the complex worlds of Hollywood and royalty for years. Her image had been curated meticulously, crafted both by her own choices and by teams of advisors and media strategists. While she had undoubtedly achieved remarkable accomplishments on her own, her dual identity often invited skepticism and judgment from both fans and critics. To some, she was a symbol of empowerment and resilience. To others, a figure whose legitimacy was questionable. Cynthia's words were not an attack in isolation. They were a commentary on this broader tension. By calling Meghan a wannabe, she was questioning not only Meghan's Hollywood legitimacy, but also the authenticity of the narrative that had been presented to the public. It was a statement loaded with meaning, and its impact was amplified by the timing, the setting, and the audience present at Santa Barbara. The room itself seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. Photographers held their cameras poised, capturing every subtle expression. Journalists leaned forward, recognizing that this was not an ordinary festival speech. Every gesture Cynthia made, every inflection in her voice, carried weight. And Meghan, sitting in the front row, was acutely aware of it. Her composure remained intact, but the tension in the room was unmistakable. The audience could feel it. The collision of reputations, the unspoken challenge, the drama unfolding in real time. Yet, for all the intensity, Cynthia's delivery was masterful. She did not overstate. She did not gesture wildly. She relied on precision, timing, and the inherent authority of her presence. And that is what made the moment so unforgettable. The words wannabe echoed not just in the room, but across social media and news outlets, instantly becoming the focal point of discussions worldwide. They were simple words, but in context, they were explosive. Cynthia's career had prepared her for moments like this. She had faced scrutiny, debate, and criticism before, and she had learned to navigate the fine line between honesty and diplomacy. But this was different. This was a public stage, filled with peers, journalists, and cameras, where every reaction would be amplified and analyzed. Her courage to speak candidly, especially in a setting designed for celebration, demonstrated both audacity and mastery of timing. The implications of her statement were far-reaching. In Hollywood, reputation is everything. One moment can redefine public perception, influence opportunities, and shift the balance of power. By challenging Meghan in this way, Cynthia not only asserted her own authority, but also forced the audience, both in the room and online, to reconsider their assumptions about Meghan, about authenticity, and about ambition. It was a reminder that, in a world obsessed with image, words can be weapons, and timing can be a tool of influence. But what truly made this moment resonate was its human element. Despite the glitz, the cameras, and the applause, there was a very real confrontation happening between two strong-willed, highly visible women. Cynthia spoke with clarity, intention, and confidence. Meghan, meanwhile, had to process, respond, and maintain composure under the weight of both public scrutiny and personal stakes. The tension was palpable, the drama undeniable, and the fallout inevitable. As the speech concluded, the audience erupted into polite applause, but the energy had shifted. This was not just another celebrity appearance. This was a moment that would dominate conversations for days, weeks, and even months. The subtle dynamics of Hollywood had been exposed, the layers of ambition and authenticity laid bare, and the ripple effects were only beginning. Backstage, whispers began immediately. Crew members exchanged knowing looks. PR teams assessed the potential damage and strategized responses. And across social media, viewers debated, speculated, and replayed the moment endlessly. Every detail, from Cynthia's poised delivery to Meghan's subtle reactions, was scrutinized and interpreted. The narrative was alive, evolving in real time, and it was impossible to predict how it would ultimately settle in the court of public opinion. But even as the festival continued, the tension lingered. This was not a fleeting moment. It was a defining one, a flashpoint that would shape perceptions, relationships, and reputations moving forward. Cynthia had spoken her mind, and in doing so, she had altered the course of the evening, the conversations that followed, and perhaps even Meghan's trajectory in Hollywood. The initial shock of the words, the polite applause, and the fleeting gasps were just the opening act. Behind the scenes, the backstage conversations, private messages, and social media backlash would escalate in ways no one anticipated. The story was far from over, and the true impact of Cynthia's statement was only beginning to unfold. The stage was set for a series of reactions, confrontations, and revelations that would ripple far beyond the Santa Barbara International Film Festival. What Cynthia had done was more than speak her mind. It was ignite a chain of events that would test reputations, expose tensions, and challenge assumptions about power, authenticity, and ambition in Hollywood. Hollywood is a city built on reinvention. On any given night, actors, directors, and influencers craft images that captivate audiences, generate buzz, and cement their legacies. In this world, perception often outweighs reality, and charisma is currency. Enter Meghan Markle, a woman whose life had been under an extraordinary microscope long before her arrival at the Santa Barbara International Film Festival. To some, she was a beacon of empowerment, a modern icon bridging Hollywood glamour and royal mystique. To others, she was an enigma, a figure whose every move invited scrutiny and speculation. But regardless of public opinion, one thing was clear. Meghan's Hollywood persona had been meticulously crafted, and every public appearance was both an opportunity and a risk. Let's rewind to the beginning. Before Meghan became part of the British royal family, she had carved out a respectable career in Hollywood. Roles in popular television series and independent films showcased her talent, ambition, and determination. She understood the industry, and she understood herself, a combination that allowed her to navigate auditions, networking events, and media attention with strategic precision. Every interview, every press photo, every social media post contributed to a persona that was polished, professional, and carefully managed. Yet Hollywood, ever hungry for drama, was rarely satisfied with polished perfection. Part of Meghan's appeal lay in her dual identity. She was a Hollywood actress, yes, but she was also poised to become royalty, a bridge between two worlds few could traverse. This duality fascinated audiences, ignited tabloids, and drew both admiration and criticism. On one hand, she represented a progressive image of a modern woman stepping into historical institutions. On the other, critics questioned her authenticity, accusing her of ambition that bordered on opportunism. Was she leveraging her acting career to secure fame and influence, or was she genuinely committed to the causes she publicly supported? The debate had followed her for years, growing louder with every high-profile event, charitable initiative, or public statement. It is crucial to understand this context when examining the Santa Barbara moment. Meghan's Hollywood persona was not merely about fame or glamour, it was about identity. Every appearance she made in public spaces, every interaction on social media, and every endorsement or collaboration she pursued was part of a carefully curated narrative. And yet, even the most carefully managed persona is vulnerable when confronted by someone unafraid to challenge it. Cynthia Erivo's words were not just a comment. They were a disruption, a direct confrontation with the very narrative Meghan had worked to cultivate. The complexity of Meghan's persona becomes even more apparent when you consider the pressures she faced as a former royal. Public expectations for royalty are notoriously rigid, governed by centuries of tradition and protocol. Meghan had to navigate these expectations while simultaneously maintaining her Hollywood presence, a balancing act that required nuance, diplomacy, and constant vigilance. Each public gesture, each choice of words, each outfit became a signal, carefully interpreted, dissected, and often misread. In many ways, Meghan's Hollywood persona was a survival mechanism, a way to assert control over her narrative amid an environment that scrutinized every detail of her life. Yet, even with this careful construction, cracks appeared. Public perception is notoriously fickle. One misinterpreted comment or social media post could trigger waves of criticism. Fans and detractors alike watched her every move, measuring it against a complex set of expectations: authenticity, relatability, ambition, and grace. Hollywood, known for its competitive nature, often amplifies perceived missteps, turning them into defining moments that overshadow accomplishments. Meghan's career trajectory had been shaped by this dual reality: success intertwined with relentless judgment, admiration entangled with doubt. And it was in this landscape that the Santa Barbara International Film Festival became more than an event. It became a stage where past scrutiny, public perception, and personal ambition collided. The audience, comprised of industry insiders, journalists, and fellow actors, was acutely aware of Meghan's history and reputation. Every gaze she encountered, every whispered conversation she overheard, contributed to a heightened awareness that this was not just another public appearance. It was a high-stakes performance, a moment where her persona would be tested in real time. It's also important to note the role of media in shaping Meghan's Hollywood persona. Coverage of her life, both in tabloids and reputable outlets, often blurred the lines between reality and narrative. Headlines praised her advocacy for women's rights, highlighted her philanthropic efforts, and celebrated her fashion choices, but they also critiqued her ambition, questioned her authenticity, and speculated about her relationships. In Hollywood, where image is paramount, this duality created constant tension. Meghan had to navigate the expectations of fans, critics, colleagues, and the global public simultaneously, a feat that demanded both emotional intelligence and strategic thinking. Part of Meghan's challenge was balancing transparency with discretion. Sharing too much risked overexposure. Sharing too little invited speculation. Every public statement or speech had to be carefully calibrated, ensuring that it aligned with her personal brand while also satisfying the curiosity of audiences worldwide. In many ways, her Hollywood persona was a delicate performance, a choreography of identity, intention, and image management. And on this particular night, with Cynthia Erivo's words looming over her, that choreography was about to be disrupted. Beyond public perception, Meghan's Hollywood persona was also shaped by private ambition and personal vision. She had cultivated a career that emphasized meaningful projects, social advocacy, and collaborations with influential figures in the entertainment industry. Her choices reflected not only a desire for professional success, but also a commitment to leveraging her platform for impact. Yet in a world that prizes visibility and immediacy, these nuanced intentions were often simplified, misunderstood, or misrepresented. The wannabe remark, delivered with precision and amplified by the audience, tapped into this tension, the gap between public narrative and personal intent. It is also essential to recognize the psychological impact of such scrutiny. Maintaining a public persona under constant observation is emotionally taxing. Every expression, gesture, or comment is analyzed, often out of context, leading to misunderstandings and misinterpretations. For Meghan, the festival was not just a professional event. It was a crucible in which her identity, reputation, and resilience would be tested. Her reaction to Cynthia's critique, therefore, was as much about personal composure as it was about public strategy. As the festival unfolded, the collision of identities, Cynthia's unflinching authenticity and Meghan's carefully constructed persona, created a moment of tension that captivated everyone in the room. Cameras captured subtle facial expressions, body language, and gestures that spoke volumes. Journalists took notes, anticipating the viral headlines that would inevitably follow. And the audience, aware of the history, the reputations, and the stakes, leaned in with rapt attention, sensing that this was no ordinary speech. It was a moment of confrontation, an unspoken challenge, and a potential turning point in Meghan's public narrative. Yet, despite the pressure, Meghan maintained her composure. Her poise was impeccable, her smile measured, and her eyes reflected a controlled awareness. This was a woman who understood the power of presence, the necessity of strategy, and the importance of timing. And yet, the subtle tension in the room, the whispered conversations, the shifting gaze of audience members, and the invisible weight of Cynthia's words, reminded everyone that even the most polished persona can be challenged in ways that resonate far beyond the immediate moment. The true drama, however, was not in Meghan's reaction alone. It lay in the ripple effect. The immediate conversations among celebrities, the analysis of journalists, and the social media frenzy that would follow. Every clip, every quote, and every image would be dissected for meaning, interpretation, and implication. The festival, which began as a celebration of cinematic achievement, had transformed into a stage where personal identity, public perception, and professional reputation collided in ways that no one could ignore. And just when the audience thought they had grasped the impact of the moment, backstage whispers, private messages, and online speculation hinted that the story was far from over. The wannabe remark was only the opening act. The reactions, alliances, and potential fallout would unfold over the coming hours and days, revealing a complex web of Hollywood politics, personal dynamics, and global scrutiny. By the end of the night, it would be clear. Meghan Markle's Hollywood persona had been tested in a way few anticipated. The collision with Cynthia Erivo's audacious statement had created a moment that would dominate headlines, spark debate, and challenge assumptions about fame, authenticity, and ambition. And the full consequences, both personal and professional, were still unfolding, setting the stage for even more dramatic revelations to come. The air backstage at the Santa Barbara International Film Festival was thick with anticipation. The hum of quiet conversations mingled with the soft shuffling of staff, the click of camera equipment being tested, and the distant murmur of the audience settling into their seats. In that liminal space between public spectacle and private preparation, the tension was palpable. Here, in the unseen corridors behind the glamour, every actor, assistant, and crew member felt the weight of expectation. It was a moment suspended in time, pregnant with possibility, and brimming with unseen drama. Cynthia Erivo stood just off stage, reviewing her notes for the 100th time. Her demeanor was composed, almost serene, yet her eyes betrayed a quiet intensity. She was aware of the audience, the cameras, and the eyes of Hollywood that would follow her every move. But she was also aware of Meghan Markle, seated in the front row, radiant and composed under the glare of attention. For a moment, the backstage world shrank to a single line of thought. What is about to unfold when I step into that light? Consider the stakes. Cynthia was known for her honesty, her fearlessness, and her refusal to shy away from difficult truths. But speaking to a room filled with influential peers and media scrutiny was a different kind of challenge. And speaking about Meghan Markle, a former royal whose every word and action had been dissected for years, added a dimension few could navigate. In the quiet seconds before stepping onto the stage, Cynthia's mind likely ran through every possible outcome: applause, silence, shock, backlash. And yet, she knew one thing for certain: this moment demanded courage. Meanwhile, Meghan's world backstage was a careful balance of poise and strategy. She had walked countless red carpets, delivered countless speeches, and handled media scrutiny with a calculated grace. Yet this night was different. She sensed the charged energy in the room, the subtle undercurrents that indicated this would not be a typical festival appearance. Her team hovered nearby, offering reassurance, reviewing talking points, and quietly observing the movements of other attendees. Every glance, every gesture mattered. Every whispered conversation could be amplified into a story that would dominate headlines within hours. It is easy to overlook the invisible dynamics that shape moments like this. Hollywood thrives on spectacle, but backstage, the reality is far more intricate. There is a choreography to movement, an unspoken protocol for interaction, and a constant negotiation of power and influence. Actors, directors, and producers navigate a delicate web of relationships, understanding that one misstep or one well-timed statement can reverberate far beyond the room. And in this charged environment, Cynthia's impending speech became more than a presentation. It became a test, a confrontation, and a challenge all at once. The seconds stretched into minutes as the moment approached. Cynthia adjusted her dress, took a deep breath, and felt the familiar hum of adrenaline. She could hear the audience applauding other speakers, the soft cadence of laughter, the occasional gasp of admiration. She knew that when she stepped onto that stage, every movement, every word, and every pause would be magnified. And she was ready. Back in the audience, Meghan's awareness heightened. She could feel the subtle shift in energy as Cynthia approached the microphone. Every instinct told her that this was a pivotal moment, not just professionally, but personally. Her posture remained perfect, her smile measured, yet her mind was acutely attuned to the atmosphere in the room. She understood that in this world, perception is reality. A single reaction can define narratives, shape reputations, and influence alliances. It is in these prelude moments that the tension of Hollywood drama is most potent. The audience sees only the surface, the elegance, the smiles, the poised gestures, but behind the scenes, the stakes are immense. Every actor preparing for a speech, every celebrity awaiting their turn on stage, and every assistant coordinating logistics feels the invisible pressure of public scrutiny. The air is heavy with expectation, and the smallest detail, a misstep, a glance, a pause, can have outsized consequences. Cynthia's team gave her a subtle nod. It was time. She stepped into the spotlight, feeling the sudden shift from backstage intimacy to public exposure. The room quieted, the cameras adjusted, and all eyes turned toward her. In that instant, the weight of history, reputation, and scrutiny collided with the bright glare of the stage lights. Every word she would speak, every subtle inflection, and every glance could become a viral moment, dissected and debated long after the applause faded. The audience itself was a tapestry of expectations and curiosity. Celebrities whispered among themselves, journalists leaned forward, and fans following live feeds around the world held their collective breath. There was a sense that something significant was about to unfold, though no one could predict the exact nature of the moment. And yet, the energy in the room was electric, charged with anticipation, as if the night itself held its breath, waiting for the first word to cut through the tension. Then came the moment of truth. Cynthia's voice projected across the room, clear and confident, commanding attention with an authority that could not be ignored. She began her speech with the customary acknowledgments, the nods to colleagues and festival organizers. And yet, beneath the surface of polite celebration, there was a deliberate intensity. Her eyes flicked toward Meghan, a subtle acknowledgement of presence that sent a ripple through the audience. The room felt it, a sudden shift in focus, an unspoken tension that tightened with each passing second. Cynthia's words, measured yet incisive, began to weave a narrative that captivated everyone in the room. She spoke of artistry, authenticity, and ambition, drawing attention to qualities that define true excellence in Hollywood. And then, in a pivot that caught even seasoned observers off guard, she addressed a particular individual in a way that was both subtle and unmistakable. Her words carried weight, intent, and resonance. And in that moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Meghan, seated in the front row, absorbed the delivery with the poise she had perfected over years of public exposure. Every muscle in her body conveyed calm composure, yet the tension in the air was undeniable. The audience sensed it, too, the collision of intention and perception, of public persona and private scrutiny. This was no longer a simple speech. It was a defining moment, a challenge, and a test of presence, composure, and resilience. Backstage, the crew watched closely, sensing the gravity of what was unfolding. Notes were taken, whispers exchanged, and the subtle choreography of media management began to unfold. This was a moment that would dominate headlines, shape conversations, and influence perceptions far beyond the walls of the festival. The words spoken in this single speech were more than commentary. They were catalysts for a chain reaction that would ripple across Hollywood and the world. And as Cynthia's speech progressed, it became increasingly clear that this was a confrontation in its most refined form. There was no shouting, no theatrics, only precise language, deliberate timing, and a commanding presence. Yet the impact was immediate. The words struck, the audience reacted, and Meghan's poised exterior belied the complexity of her internal calculations. Every nuance, the tone, the pause, the glance, was magnified by the collective awareness of the room and the cameras capturing each moment for global audiences. This moment, frozen in time, was the crucible of public scrutiny. It was where reputation, identity, and perception collided with unflinching clarity. For Meghan, it was a reminder that even the most carefully constructed persona is vulnerable when challenged by someone unafraid to speak truth, or what they perceive as truth, on a public stage. And for Cynthia, it was a demonstration of power, precision, and the ability to command attention in a room filled with Hollywood's elite. But the tension did not end there. The first word, the first glance, the first subtle gesture, set in motion a cascade of reactions that would unfold in unpredictable ways. The audience's applause, the whispered comments, and the social media chatter were only the beginning. Backstage, private conversations, urgent messages, and strategic discussions were already shaping the narrative. And the story was far from over. As the spotlight focused fully on Cynthia and the room held its collective breath, it became clear that the moment before the speech was not just a prelude. It was a crucible, a test of perception, and a spark that would ignite one of the most talked-about confrontations in recent Hollywood history. The room fell into a hush the instant Cynthia Erivo's voice cut through the lingering murmurs of applause. The Santa Barbara International Film Festival, known for its elegance and celebration of cinematic achievement, suddenly felt charged with something heavier, an undercurrent of tension, anticipation, and curiosity. All eyes were on her. But beyond the usual spotlight of the festival, one presence in particular, the front row seat occupied by Meghan Markle, became the silent focal point of every gesture, pause, and inflection. Cynthia began as expected, acknowledging the festival organizers, fellow artists, and the films being celebrated. Her tone was warm yet commanding, drawing in the audience with the effortless charisma that had made her a star. Yet as the first sentences of her speech flowed, there was a subtle shift. The air seemed to tighten, as if the room itself recognized that something was about to break through the carefully choreographed decorum of the evening. People leaned forward instinctively, sensing that the next few moments would be anything but ordinary. And then came the pivot, a line so simple, yet so loaded it immediately drew sharp, involuntary reactions from those paying attention. Cynthia addressed the concept of authenticity in Hollywood, speaking passionately about the importance of integrity, commitment, and the courage to stay true to oneself amid relentless scrutiny. She praised the work of her peers, highlighted examples of dedication in the industry, and laid the groundwork for a statement that would be unforgettable. Every word was precise, deliberate, and imbued with intent. For Meghan Markle, the moment was electric. She sat with impeccable poise, her posture perfect, her expression calm, but her mind raced. Years of public scrutiny, dual identities, and careful narrative management had led to this single, piercing moment. Cynthia's words were not abstract. They were targeted, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. And then came the line that would send shockwaves throughout the room. The word wannabe. It was brief, almost casual in delivery, yet the weight of it reverberated instantly. A single word, strategically placed, capable of shifting perceptions, challenging authority, and undermining a carefully crafted image. The audience reacted subtly. Some eyes widened, some lips pursed, and some whispered to their neighbors. But the impact was undeniable. Social media, even in those early seconds, buzzed with anticipation as the word echoed through the collective consciousness of those watching. Cynthia's delivery was masterful. She did not raise her voice, nor did she make overt gestures. Instead, she relied on timing, subtle inflection, and a keen understanding of human perception. Her eyes briefly met Meghan's, not in confrontation, but in acknowledgement, cementing the moment with a precision that only someone of Cynthia's caliber could achieve. To the untrained eye, it might have seemed like a passing comment. To those attuned to Hollywood nuance, it was a calculated strike, a masterclass in presence, and a demonstration of influence without overt aggression. The reaction was instantaneous and layered. Meghan maintained composure outwardly, a practiced smile that masked any internal tension. Her hands rested lightly on her lap, her posture unwavering, yet the weight of the room's collective gaze was palpable. The cameras, trained on her every micro-expression, captured subtle shifts in her demeanor. A small tilt of the head, a fleeting flash in her eyes, a breath held just a fraction longer than usual. It was a moment where performance met reality, where persona and perception collided under the unforgiving light of scrutiny. But the audience wasn't passive. Every journalist, photographer, and attendee sensed the gravity of the statement. In Hollywood, words carry power, and timing amplifies it. Cynthia's remark, seemingly innocuous to some, acted as a catalyst. The room, filled with industry veterans and media professionals, recognized the implications immediately. Discussions ignited quietly in hushed tones, glances exchanged behind polite smiles, whispers that would later evolve into headlines and viral clips. The moment had transcended the speech. It had become an event, a narrative, and a cultural touchpoint all at once. Cynthia continued, seamlessly weaving praise for genuine talent with subtle reminders of the value of authenticity. Her tone never wavered, but her words layered multiple messages: celebration, critique, and challenge. To some, she was inspiring. To others, she was confronting a truth they hadn't articulated aloud. Every sentence built tension, like a symphony carefully composed to reach its crescendo. By the time she circled back to her main points, the audience was captivated, and Meghan's presence in the room elevated the stakes to a near-mythical level. For Meghan, processing the moment required both instinct and strategy. Years in the public eye had trained her to manage optics, maintain grace under pressure, and project confidence even when confronted with unexpected criticism. Yet, even with all this experience, the subtle audacity of Cynthia's delivery demanded attention. Meghan's response, while outwardly composed, was informed by a lifetime of navigating dual realities: celebrity and royalty, public persona and private self. The stakes were immense. One reaction could shape headlines, influence social media discourse, and affect public perception globally. Meanwhile, backstage and across the audience, the ripple effect intensified. Assistants and PR teams scrambled discreetly, assessing reactions, anticipating media coverage, and considering responses. Social media users, streaming clips live, began dissecting the moment frame by frame, analyzing tone, expression, and context. By the end of the speech, the phrase wannabe had already begun to trend, amplified by speculation and curiosity. The instantaneous feedback loop of modern celebrity culture transformed a single word into a phenomenon that could not be contained within the walls of the festival. The brilliance of Cynthia's approach lay in its precision. She did not need volume or spectacle. A single word, delivered with calculated subtlety, had the power to disrupt, provoke, and dominate attention. It was an act of narrative mastery, demonstrating how influence in Hollywood can be wielded not with confrontation alone, but with timing, skill, and strategic insight. Every attendee in the room, from journalists to fellow actors, understood that they had witnessed something rare, a moment of unspoken truth delivered with both elegance and authority. And yet, the drama was not confined to the stage. Meghan's internal calculations, her poised exterior, and the subtle gestures of those around her amplified the tension exponentially. It was a collision of strategy, personality, and public perception unfolding in real time. The impact would extend far beyond the festival, shaping conversations in media outlets, talk shows, and social media platforms worldwide. By the time Cynthia concluded her speech, the applause was polite, yet tinged with the understanding that something extraordinary had occurred. People rose to their feet, acknowledging both the artistry of her performance and the audacity of her statement. Cameras clicked, microphones captured reactions, and social media lit up with analysis, opinion, and speculation. The story was no longer confined to the festival. It had entered the public consciousness, where every angle would be examined, every implication debated. But what made this moment unforgettable was the combination of subtlety, intention, and the complex dynamics at play. It wasn't merely about confrontation. It was about control, narrative power, and timing. Cynthia had demonstrated an ability to command attention and influence perception without shouting, without spectacle, and without breaking decorum. She had created a ripple that would become a wave, challenging Meghan's carefully curated persona and amplifying scrutiny in ways few could anticipate. And just when it seemed the moment had passed, whispers began to circulate. Backstage conversations, private messages, and the first wave of media speculation hinted at repercussions that extended far beyond the festival hall. The impact of Cynthia's words was only beginning to unfold, setting the stage for public reactions, private calculations, and a cascade of events that would dominate headlines for weeks to come. The speech had done more than shock the audience. It had exposed vulnerabilities, challenged assumptions, and redefined the stakes for everyone involved. It was a masterclass in timing, influence, and narrative power, leaving no one in the room unaffected. And for Meghan, the challenge was just beginning. The next steps would test not only her Hollywood persona, but her ability to navigate scrutiny, reputation, and the unrelenting lens of public opinion. The moment Cynthia Erivo dropped the word wannabe, the atmosphere in the Santa Barbara International Film Festival's main hall shifted almost imperceptibly but palpably. To the untrained eye, it may have seemed as if the room carried on, applause, polite smiles, murmured compliments. But anyone attuned to the subtleties of Hollywood knew something had changed. A ripple had passed through the crowd, a subtle vibration of tension, recognition, and shock. The word lingered like a shadow, touching everyone in the room differently, leaving some unsettled, others silently exhilarated, and a few outright alarmed. Let's start with the obvious, the celebrities in attendance. Hollywood thrives on perception, power dynamics, and hierarchy. Many actors present had built their careers on subtle negotiation, reputation management, and strategic visibility. For them, Cynthia's statement was both daring and audacious. Some nodded imperceptibly, silently approving her boldness. Others exchanged glances, eyebrows raised, analyzing not just the remark but the target. Meghan Markle, a figure both iconic and polarizing. This was not an idle insult. It was a statement, a challenge, and a public recalibration of status in a single word. Journalists and media professionals were instantaneously alert. Notebooks were pulled out, pens poised, and smartphones raised as every nuance, Cynthia's inflection, Meghan's expression, the audience's reaction, was captured for future headlines. The word wannabe would not stay confined to the festival hall. It was already set to explode across social media and international coverage. Reporters whispered to one another, hypothesizing about motives, context, and implications. Some marveled at the precision. Others debated whether it constituted professional audacity or personal attack. In every case, it was now news, and the story was trending before the speech had even ended. Meghan herself remained outwardly composed, but her internal calculus was meticulous. Every microexpression, every subtle shift in posture, every breath was a silent negotiation between maintaining dignity and assessing the impact. Years of public scrutiny, royalty-level media exposure, and Hollywood experience had conditioned her for moments like this. But experience doesn't erase tension, especially when confronted with something so direct and unexpected. She understood the implications immediately. This wasn't just a fleeting remark. This was a declaration, an evaluation, a challenge to her credibility and authenticity, delivered in front of peers, journalists, and global cameras. And then there were the whispers. Subtle, almost conspiratorial, weaving through the audience. Colleagues exchanged glances, murmured to neighbors, and pointed discreetly toward the front row. Some were shocked, some amused, and some intrigued. The social dynamics of Hollywood meant that nothing occurs in isolation. The room was alive with speculation, analysis, and judgment. By the end of that night, these whispers would coalesce into articles, opinion pieces, and endless commentary across platforms. The wannabe line would become shorthand for a perceived rupture in public image, sparking debates that would ripple far beyond the festival itself. Even the organizers and festival staff were caught in the undercurrent. Their role, usually centered on ensuring smooth proceedings, had suddenly shifted. They observed with careful discretion, aware that a simple acknowledgement could be construed as approval or disapproval. The energy in the room was now a balancing act between decorum and disruption. It was a masterclass in how a single word, delivered with intent and precision, could recalibrate an environment that had previously felt controlled, ceremonial, and predictable. Meanwhile, social media was already beginning to process the event in real time. Clips of the speech circulated within minutes, hashtags formed, and global viewers dissected every second. Analysts debated the tone, dissected the body language, and interpreted the subtleties of the exchange. Was this playful ribbing, a serious critique, or a subtle humiliation? The ambiguity made it all the more compelling. The instantaneous feedback loop amplified the tension exponentially, transforming the speech from a localized moment into a global phenomenon. Back in the room, reactions were layered. Some audience members were visibly impressed by Cynthia's audacity, nodding with quiet admiration. Others appeared uncomfortable, caught in the awkward intersection of etiquette, entertainment, and raw human drama.